It's 1:49. Now, puberty blockers will no longer be available for children on the NHS in England.
The puberty-suppressing hormones are used to pause the onset of physical changes such as breast development or facial hair in children who have gender dysphoria.
Now, the NHS England has banned the prescription of such drugs for children at gender identity clinics. The move has been welcomed by the government. Well, our guest this afternoon previously worked at a leading UK centre for gender dysphoria. Thanks for joining us, Sue. Sue, very interested to speak to you about this because you worked at the Tavistock clinic, which has become notorious among many who are very deeply concerned about how gender dysphoria is being treated in this country. And you chose to whistleblow because you had concerns that clinicians there were jumping to drugs before giving talking therapy. Can you explain what exactly was going on in that process?
Yes, thanks very much for having me on. And the first thing I'd say is I'm not sure I chose to whistleblow. It didn't feel like much of a choice. It felt really like a clinical obligation. And the reason being is I've worked in mental health all of my adult life, really, in the NHS, and I'm now a psychotherapist. But the approach that the rest of the Tavistock clinic took to mental illness, emotional disturbance, and symptoms that were a result of that was to holistically work therapeutically with the mind. But when I went to work in the GIDS, the Children's Service, I very quickly became aware that there were some children who had only been seen approximately 4 times and were being recommended for puberty blockers. And I raised concerns within the team initially, obviously with my clinical managers, but I didn't feel that was very comfortable or possible to be heard. So then I went outside the team to the Tavistock clinical director, and David Taylor did a report about it, but the truth of it was really the report sank without trace. Whether it was buried or just lost, I don't know. And so the clinical model has continued despite the very similar concerns that were raised back in 2006 by David Taylor's report. And they have continued until this announcement yesterday by NHS England.
As this announcement has been made, I understand that there are fewer than 100 children in the whole country of 67, 68 million, fewer than 100 who are currently on NHS puberty blockers. Just how big is this issue? It seems like it's a very, very small percentage of people being treated who are actually given this treatment.
So the first thing to say about that is we really don't know how many children are receiving this treatment, partly because many of them have gone privately. But the other thing is, this is a worldwide problem. You know, over in the States, there are thousands of children receiving hormones and surgeries. And the difficulty has been that all along, throughout the world, I think, in most of the Western world, it's become a politicised area, which should be about clinical care and an evidence base. But because of that politicisation and the ideology around, people have become very wary of being prepared to research and study what the effects of this experimental treatment are. And so there are many claims made, by WPATH, for example, and by some of the charities that, you know, there's only 1% regret. That's absolutely impossible to say. You know, I myself know personally several people who have chosen to detransition, but we are also unable to say how many detransitioners there might be or regretters because the Tavistock GIDS did not follow up their children. And that was proven when we went to the judicial review. And finally, the judges asked the Tavistock to answer some of these questions that they kept avoiding answering. And it was at that point that they had to confess they didn't know what happened to their patients.
Sue, just lastly, because we're running out of time, do you fully support then this ban on puberty blockers for children? And, well, just that question, really. Do you fully support this?
Okay. So look, it's a really complex answer, and I'll try and be really quick. The thing is, this is a complex presentation. Gender dysphoria is like a symptom, and it's presented in the physical body in the same way that other psychological illnesses can be. The difficulty we have is, as yet, we do not know. We don't know the answers. And so at the moment, the caution of saying, do no harm seems firstly a sensible one. But my plea would be that we absolutely need for child and adolescent mental health services to be better funded, better resourced. Because the problem is, although everyone's saying, let's give these children support and therapy, there are very few people like me, who are prepared to work in this area because they fear the threat of a conversion therapy. And secondly, it is challenging
Sue, I'm
work.
terribly sorry. We're going to have to leave it there because we've run out of time, but fantastic to speak to you.